The Ikea Hemnes range are well-built pine timber pieces, but they lack personality and style. Today I'll be transforming these basic Hemnes nightstands and giving them a totally fresh new look. And I'm going to paint the body in that same Akuba colour, and I think I'm going to attempt something a little bit different and something I haven't done before and create a textured front detail for both the drawers using this stencil and some plaster. Do is remove the dark varnish, and I'm going to be using some stripper for that to make it easier to sand. Stripping is so messy, so I like to use old bed sheets to capture all the varnish underneath. Whilst I wait for that stripper to work, I'll give all of these sand. It's a bit of a first. It didn't do much at all. It did pick up on some of the edges, but it's never not taken it off before. So I think I'm just going to go to sanding on an 80 grit, and hopefully that goes to the raw pine underneath. Just going to give these a clean and then let that dry and then get onto the sanding. To create the textured paste for the stencil, I'm just add plaster to the container. Because it's a little bit dry, I'm going to hydrate it. Some water. I'm also going to add the paint colour to this as well. Mixing in. I'm going to line up this centre feature. So I'm a little bit nervous because I've never done this before, so if all else fails, I can always just wipe it off and either paint it on or try a different texture technique. So I'm just going to Okay, this is how it's looking so far. So I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to leave this on as it dries or peel it off, but I'm thinking I'm just going to peel it off and we'll see how it goes from there. Oh, not bad. I mean, there's definitely some areas that could be cleaned. I just have to wipe that off, but I might let it dry droopy so I'm not touching any of the other details. Okay, here goes attempt number 2. all done. So now that's the moment of truth. Oh, much better. Sort of, I think that's a little splodgy, but improving. So some of these thicker spots, I think they'll sand out when it's all dry, so I'm not too phased about that, but I will just clean up some of the edges of these areas here. So I think it's going to take maybe a day, maybe two to dry, as it is a little bit on the thicker side, but loving how it's looking so far. I'm going to add a bit more of the Akubra. Just want a bit more richness in the colouring. So it's always better to go lighter in your wash than darker, because it's easier to build up the colours rather than taking them away. Coat. Happy with the second coat application, as it looks a lot softer and it's really reduced that golden yellow tone of the pine. So I'll let that dry overnight. Plaster has dried overnight, which is great, so it means I can get on to continuing on the stencil pattern. So what I'm going to do is actually flip it over and create like a sort of book match of it and use the gap as its divider. So I've just got to tape that down. Let's see how that went. Ah, wonderful. Happy with that. I just repeat that on the other side, and I find having something to support the end works really well, because otherwise it sort of drops off and it might make it a little bit wonky. So keeping it straight is good. Before we can get onto the painting, I'm just going to give this a good stuff sanding. Make sure the chalk paint will apply nice and well. Move on to the fun stuff, adding in the colour. So always make sure you give your paint a good mix before beginning, because the colour will settle to the bottom sometimes. keep the brushes for the next coat. Some glad wrap. And wrap that up. Saves me from washing. I'm totally in love with how this Achilles Akubra colour has come out and stained the plaster, but that will be painted in the same colour to make it a bit more subtle as well. So I've just got to make sure that I let it completely dry and not rush the process. So give that a few hours because it is a bit cooler today as well. And the paint wash is absolutely gorgeous. And then I'll apply a clear coat on the top and on the body once it's all painted and dried. The plaster's now dry, so I'm using a little bit to just smooth that down, and then I can start painting. Do good dusting. Tip when working with plaster is not to sand off too much because then it's not going to come out when you paint over it. So it's a little bit too sanded in these areas, but a small area you won't really notice too much. Because this is a texture print, you want to make sure you're brushing in all directions just to get into all those different nooks and crannies as well. This colour is a better example of how the Akubra chalk paint is going to come out once I apply the second coat to this, just because it has been dyed already into the plaster. It seems to absorb a lot less for its first coat. So I'm going to get into the second coat, but absolutely loving how it's looking so far. I think it's a really nice subtle texture, and I can't wait to get this all finished. I'll give you a side-by-side of how it looks with just the stained plaster with the chalk paint and then when it's painted. So you can see it's quite a big difference in terms of subtlety. It is still a really cool effect with the plaster stained with that chalk paint, but because I'm working with lighter wood tones, I think that would be just too harsh of a contrast and sort of be too much of a focal. So definitely more of the look of what we're going for. So let's get on to finishing the second coat. Day 3 of this Ikea flip, and I think I'm just going to give it one more coat to give it the full depth of this colour. When it comes to applying the last coat, I like to use a fine artist paintbrush, as I find it gets into all the details really nicely. It doesn't use up as much paint, and I'm also able to control brush marks a lot more than the standard big chalk brush. Also let that third coat dry. I'm now going to apply the protector on the timber tops so that has time to dry. I like to use a sponge to apply the clear coat, so I will pour some at the top. And you make sure to do the sides and then clean up the excess. So we're now getting so close to the finish line. going to be sealing all the chalk painted areas with clear coat. I find using an angle cutting brush is a lot easier to apply top coat. And I'm going a little bit heavier on the clear coat application because of the raised stencil design as well, to make sure it gets into all the nooks and crannies of the design.